Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Carly Shortino Poulter, and I'm the director of the ARC Advocacy Network at the ARC of Indiana. And more importantly, especially for tonight and the topic we're dealing with, I'm a fellow mom. I have a 25-year-old son with autism who receives Social Security benefits, who's on a Medicaid waiver, who has Medicaid services. And so I'm right there in this with all of you. Um, I think right now, as I talk to people, you know, there are so many things that are changing, and there is so much rumor, and there is so much, you know, there's just so much uncertainty, and people feel really unsettled, and they're feeling anxious, and they're worried about what's going to happen now, what's going to happen 6 months from now, what's going to happen a year from now. And so that's just causing a lot of anxiety. And so, a lot of times when we feel anxious, when we feel like we don't have any control, it can help to control the things that we can control. And so tonight, that's what we're going to talk about. You know, preparing, planning in uncertain times, planning for what we need to be able to do to make sure that our loved ones, are able to get the things that they need, and to make sure that we are prepared for what's going on as best we can when we don't know what all is going to happen. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. By no means is this going to be an exhaustive list. By no means is this going to answer all of your questions, but this is a place to start. And that's the really important thing. And so as we're going along tonight, I want you to ask your questions. You can put them in the Q&A, and we will stop at different points to see what questions people have. And you know, because we want to prepare as much as we can, even though there are things coming down the road that we just don't know yet. And so let's go ahead and get started. So let me share my screen. You guys can't see that. There we go. All right. So one thing that's important is, as strange as this is going to sound, let's start from the beginning, because the reality is our loved ones' lives revolve around paperwork. And the one of the few, truths, universal truths we have is that, documentation can save you. So let's start by gathering the documents. And one of the things I'm going to recommend is that you have both hard copies of all of these documents, but that you also make electronic copies of these documents, because you'll be amazed at how often you will send a document off in an email, or if you've already got it scanned into your computer, where you can upload documents directly. Because one of the things that we're seeing right now is that, for example, Medicaid is doing a lot of reviews where they are sending letters to people asking for updated information. And if you've got your documents all together, it makes it easier to provide that information to make sure that a person's Medicaid, and therefore their waiver, are staying in place. So let's start with the basic documents, the ones that can easily get overlooked, but are the most foundational. And so the first one is your loved one's birth certificate. Let's make sure you've got a copy of it and you know where it is, because that's the other thing is oftentimes people have all of this information somewhere, sometimes in a box, sometimes in one of like 10 boxes, but this way, get it all together, get it all organized. So when you need it, you know exactly where to look. And so getting that birth certificate, making sure your loved one has a state issued ID card. That's always a smart thing to have anyway, no matter what. And so making sure that you have a state issued ID card. A lot of times people only think of driver's licenses, but no, the BMV also does state ID cards. And they do them for children too. So if your child is a minor, even if they're, like 8 years old, go ahead and get them a state issued ID card and preferably get what's called the real ID card. That's the one that's going to have a little star in the corner. And the reason for that is the real ID is something that was created several years ago, and slowly they've been working to require its implementation. Well, now that's here. And so now, in order for a person to fly or for a person to go into a federal building, they need to have that real ID card. And it's got a couple of additional requirements on proving your identity. But especially if your loved one lives with you and you already have that real ID card, many times you can simply attest that the individual is your loved one and that they live with you, and they will take that into consideration as well, especially when it comes to things like having mail that has their name and address on it. Because when you're a young child, they may not get much in the way of mail, especially from a source of authority. But a lot of times, family members can attest, yes, this really is my 14-year-old child, and yes, they live with me, and oftentimes they'll be able to do that. Getting a copy of their Social Security card, of their Medicaid card, of their Medicare card if they have that, proof of eligibility or benefit verification letters, other health insurance information. So if they have private health insurance outside of Medicaid or outside of Medicare, making sure you have all of that information in one location, and also bank account information. Now, the reality is, a lot of times we may not know where these documents are, or we may not even have them. We may not even have our own birth certificates. You would be amazed, and frankly, maybe even a little scared, at how easy it is to get these documents. For example, if you don't have your own birth certificate, you can contact the county records department or the county health department of the county where you were born, and oftentimes you can just order a copy of that and they will send it to you. If the individual is married or has ever been married, you want to make sure you've got copies of the marriage certificate, um, divorce decrees, if there's ever been a divorce decree, custody arrangements, if the individual is still a minor and there's still child custody, that is in place, you know, and also, let's say somebody was married and their spouse passed away, making sure that you've got a copy of that death certificate available so that anytime you need those documents, you have those documents all in one location, all together, so that as you need them going forward, you know exactly where to look. We also want to talk about support documents. So if you have an individual who is under guardianship, making sure you readily have a copy of those guardianship papers, of the power of attorney form, of their supported decision-making agreement if you're using supported decision-making. If they are just using a healthcare representative, having a copy of that healthcare representative form readily available. If they have a psychiatric advance directive, which is something that you have to create with your psychiatrist, making sure you have a copy of that. If they have any other advance directive, which is sometimes commonly called a living will, you want to make sure that you have all of those documents ready to go. And so I'm looking really quickly just to see if we might have anything in the Q&A, because that was kind of popping up. Somebody's asking, do you recommend a passport? You know what? If you are willing and able to get a passport, absolutely, because that is a very, that's a document that carries a lot of weight, that in and of itself can be used to prove an individual's identity. Plus, hey, if you win a trip to Jamaica, you can go to Jamaica and not have to delay it for a year while you're waiting to get your passport. So absolutely. And to start that process, I believe I'm going to say this because I don't actually have a passport yet. I know I need to do that. But I believe you actually start that process at your post office. So you can easily do that. And so then this is not something you're going to gather, but this is something you're going to create, which is a list of important contacts. Because oftentimes, as you're filling out forms, as there are Social Security redeterminations and all sorts of things like that, you've got to provide contact information for certain people. So let's go ahead and create that and get that in one list so that we know exactly where to look. So you want to have the people's full contact information, their name, phone number, address, because sometimes they ask for the address, um, email, as well as the company or agency or practice that they work for. And so you want to include all of your medical professionals, including specialists. And you also want to list what their specialties are because you might know who Dr. White is. Somebody else may not know, oh yeah, Dr. White's their cardiologist. So you want to give that information and have that readily available. Having your waiver case manager, your waiver providers, including what service they provide and when they worked with your love or when they work with your loved one. So for example, if your loved one is using behavior management services, and they have a behavior consultant, you want to have their name, their phone number, their agency, and their email. And then say your loved one sees them at 3:30 every Monday afternoon, or whatever the case may be, just so that you've got that information readily available, and how often they're actually working with the individuals. If an individual has therapies, what are those therapies? Who are those therapists? What are the therapy practices? And when are they receiving therapy and how often are they receiving therapy? So if they're doing, speech twice a week, you want to make sure that you say they're seeing this speech therapist at this practice and they're seeing them for 1 hour twice a week, or whatever the case may be, so that you have all of that important information all in one place. And especially a medication list, because there are times where you will need that medication list. And, maybe they've fallen and they wind up going to the ER to make sure that they haven't broken their leg, or, or something's going on where suddenly they need to provide that medication list. If you've already got it typed out and you've already got it ready, not only, do you have a hard copy of it somewhere, but having it on your computer, more importantly, having it on your phone so that when you need it, it is literally, right at your fingertips, will make a huge difference. Because when you are in an emergency, or when you are when you are faced with a ton of paperwork and you're feeling kind of pressured by that, having all of that information already to gathered and at your fingertips makes life a whole lot easier. Then let's gather all of their disability documents and consider updating these documents if it's needed. So, first of all, a list of all of their diagnoses. I said earlier that my son has autism, and he does. He has several other conditions in addition to all of that. I typically just refer to as autism because that's the main issue he has, the main need he has. But for example, he also has sensory processing disorder. He also has a specific reading disability. And despite how generic that sounds, that is actually the medical diagnosis, is specific reading disability. And so you want to have a place where every single diagnosis is listed so that you don't forget all of them or some of them. Having a copy of their most recent psychological evaluation readily available is important. Having their individual education plan or their IEP, if they're near school aged, is important. So, if somebody is, 19, 20 years old, having their IEP readily available is a smart thing to have. If they're 40 years old, okay, that IEP is going to be so out of date, it doesn't matter anymore. So if they're near that school age, you want to make sure you've got a copy of the most recent IEP and the most recent school psych eval that may have been done. Their individualized plan for employment, or IPE. I know the fact that those acronyms are so close is ridiculous, but they didn't ask me about that. But your individual plan for employment is actually your VR plan. So having that together, is important. And then if you have a loved one who is getting MRO services or Medicaid Rehabilitation Option services, those are services available through a community mental health center. Having all of those documents together and readily available will be really important if you need to have your Social Security redetermination, or if we're doing a new level of care assessment for a new program, or we're reassessing disability for whatever reason is necessary. You've got all of those documents in one location. And with that, have those waiver documents together. That level of care screening and determination, that is actually done every single year, not just when you applied for the waiver, that is done on a regular basis. In fact, right now, the individuals who are on the skilled nursing waivers, so the TBI waiver, the health and wellness waiver, and the pathways for aging waiver, their level of care screening tool has just been changed. A brand new tool went into effect July 1st, so we're 10 days in, making sure you not only have a copy of your previous level of care determination and screening tool, but also the current one, because they're going to reassess everybody over the next 6 months. Now, don't panic by that. That's actually just normal operating procedure for the skilled nursing waivers. So it's not like you're going to necessarily notice a big change, other than who may be doing that assessment. That may be done by an agency called Maximus. But having copies of that so that if you ever need it, you've got it available. Having your person-centered individualized service plan, which is your waiver plan, having your behavior support plan or any risk plans that your loved one may have, having all of that information together and readily available makes life easier. When maybe when we're doing waiver things, or maybe there's been a reassessment and something and they're suddenly saying, oh, you no longer qualify for this waiver, you've got all of those documents together so that you can appeal that. Or maybe you need it for Social Security purposes because that helps prove an individual's disability. I'm going to stop because we've got a few more questions that have come in. And so, oh, somebody was asking, having proof of citizenship too, right? Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That is something. See, that's just it. There are things that, without meaning to, we overlook. And so if your loved one is a naturalized citizen, or if they are a documented immigrant, making sure you have all of those documents together so that you can provide them at a moment's notice and send them to anyone you need to. So thank you so much for bringing up proof of citizenship, or proof of residency status if they are an immigrant. Um, oh, we had talked a little bit about passports earlier. Somebody says you can also do the passport online now too, but they can't remember the site to do that. Um, let's see. Uh, Okay, so somebody's asking, how long does it take? It's been 2 years almost, and I applied when he got diagnosed, but haven't heard anything about the waiver since then. And so part of that, how long the waiting lists are for the waivers depends on which waiver you're talking about. If you're talking about the family supports waiver, it's about 3.5 years at this point. And that's, just kind of an educated guess. That's, that can change at various times, but that's kind of a good rule of thumb. But one of the things you can do is there's actually a website where you can look at where you're at on the waitlist portal, make sure that they have all of your correct information, and see what your application date is, because that gives you an idea of how long it may take, or how long it may be before they target you. And that's the official word they will use, is target you for that waiver. Um, let's see. Okay. And so I'm gonna go on to the next thing now, because this one is actually really, really important. So Medicaid has a Medicaid benefits portal, and that QR code on your screen is actually basically a process map. to walk you through how to create a Medicaid benefits portal account if you don't already have one, because you really, really, really need to have a Medicaid benefits portal account, but then also how you can use it. Because one of the things we are seeing at the ARC is that a lot of people are losing their Medicaid, and they're only finding out because their provider calls them up and says, hey, we can't bill for you anymore. Your Medicaid's been terminated. We can't serve you. But they've never gotten any letters to warn them about any of this. And a lot of times what's happened is Medicaid has sent a letter requesting information. And because you never got that letter requesting information, you didn't respond. And because you didn't respond, they've terminated your Medicaid. None of that's supposed to happen. You're supposed to get all of those notices, but what we're seeing right now is that people aren't getting those notices. And so one of the things that we are actually recommending is that people create that Medicaid benefits portal account, and that they go in once a month and check it. When you pay your rent or you pay your mortgage, go ahead and log into your Medicaid benefits portal at the same time. And you can go to where it says notices and correspondence, and you can see every letter that Medicaid has sent you. That way you can, in case that letter doesn't get to you, because right now the postal system, especially in Indiana, is having some pretty substantial problems with mail getting lost or getting delayed or getting significantly delayed. That way you can see if Medicaid is sending you something, and you can respond to it. And the great thing about the Medicaid's benefits portal is that you can upload documents directly through the portal. So you don't have to worry about something getting lost as you send it in. You have a time date stamp of when they got it. You can not only see what information they are requesting from you, but you can also confirm what information they have gotten. So use that QR code. Or you can go to our website and find the process map on how you set up that Medicaid benefits portal account and how you can use it, so you make sure that your loved one's Medicaid is not interrupted. Some of the documents you will often need for Medicaid, and there are a lot of them, but one of the first things I'm going to encourage you to do is know what type of Medicaid you are on. I don't mean Hoosier Healthwise versus Hoosier Care Connect. I don't mean Anthem versus Humana versus United. Believe it or not, here in Indiana, we have 37 different types of Medicaid. And while there are some general overarching rules for Medicaid, every one of those 37 types has their own exceptions and their own twists and turns and their own requirements. So you need to know what type of Medicaid you are on. And when you go to that Medicaid benefits portal and you're looking at your case information, you can actually see what type of Medicaid you're on. When you go to print that Medicaid benefits verification or proof of eligibility is what it's called there, that proof of eligibility will actually say what categories of Medicaid you're in. And some of the common ones that we often, our loved ones will often have are Medicaid disability, which is MAD, Medicaid for people on SSI, which is MASI, MedWorks, which is MADW. Sometimes individuals will have HIP, and knowing if you have HIP versus Medicaid disability is essential because they have radically different rules. Also, there's a type of Medicaid called QMB. It's also called Medicaid or MAL. That's for individuals who have both Medicare and Medicaid. So knowing what type of Medicaid you're on is essential. But some of the documents that Medicaid will routinely ask for are 3 months worth of pay stubs, 3 months worth of bank statements, all asset and resource information, and your employer information. So have, the company you work for, their address, and how much you make either per hour, or what your salary is. And especially for Medicaid, how much you get paid per month is important. And so I saw that we had a couple more questions come in. And so I'm going to stop here and check those out. Um, let's see. Um, Okay, so some of these questions that have come in, I'm going to delay answering just a little bit because we're going to get to some of these topics here in a minute, and I think it would be better to answer them then. Let's see. Um, and then one of the things that we're kind of seeing across the board is that um, a lot of agencies are losing staff. We have agencies who are letting staff go, and then oftentimes there's a hiring freeze, and so those staff members are not getting replaced, and so that is absolutely causing a delay in processing a lot of information. That's also one of the reasons why I will say if you can upload information directly into a computer system, you should do it because that way you don't have to worry about it getting lost along the way. And so those are all some of the things that I want you guys to keep in mind as we're talking about all of this. Somebody's asking, is this being recorded so that we can watch it again? You betcha it is. Because let's be honest, this is a lot of information. And I know if this were me and I were at home, I would be like furiously taking notes and then still miss stuff and want to go back. We are absolutely recording this and it will be posted to the ARC's YouTube channel within a few days. So you betcha we're recording this. So now let's talk about Social Security because that has its own documents that they want, and so you want to make sure that you've got all of their information together in one location, because even in the best of times, when a person is on some form of Social Security disability program, their disability is reassessed every 3, 5, or 7 years, depending on the severity of a person's disability. So this is something that you routinely have to provide anyway. So making sure that you have all of those documents together, making sure that you have it all in one location that's easily accessible and easily findable will make your life easier later. And so one of the things I'm going to recommend is that you create a My SSA account. Now, I will tell you that the login for Social Security has recently changed. And I say recently, like within the last year or so. They are no longer using just the user ID and password. Now you have to use either login.gov or ID.me to log in. And don't get me wrong, all you've got to do is push a button on the Social Security's website because it's already there so that you can do that. But here's the thing, one of the things we're hearing is that people are having trouble logging in or they can't create an account. And part of that is some of the efforts that the US government has taken to try to confirm people's identities and make sure they really are who they say they are. And in those cases, you may need to make an appointment to go into your local Social Security office to prove your identity, either to unlock your account so that you can start logging back in remotely, or to give you the permission to create an account so that you can log in remotely. You can find your local Social Security office at ssa.gov. That stands for Social Security Administration.gov/locator. By the way, when you go and you try to locate your local office, sometimes they will have the national 800 number to call, and sometimes they will actually have the local office's 800 number because right now you can't just walk into a Social Security office. You actually have to make an appointment to go into your Social Security office. And so if you need to do that, I want you to know how to get in touch with them so that you can set that appointment up. So some of the documents that you want to have from and for Social Security is, first of all, that Social Security benefits verification letter. And again, part of that is so you know what program you're on. Oftentimes, people never know whether they're on SSI or SSDI, or they think they're still on SSI when they were converted to SSDI years ago. The reason that's important is because while there are a lot of similarities in the programs, there are also a lot of differences. And so by knowing which Social Security program you're on, it lets you know what the rules are that you have to follow and what the benefits are that you may be able to take advantage of, especially if you want to be able to work. Speaking of work, having a work activity report readily available, probably your most recent work activity report. And I will warn you, please don't kill me for telling you this because that work activity report is about 12 pages long, but actually report a lot of information about the accommodations and the supports and the additional services that your loved one gets to help them maintain their job. And that in turn helps them maintain their benefits. So you want to make sure that you're filling that out. An employer subsidy form. Not everybody has that, but it can make a huge difference for Social Security. So I recommend doing that. In fact, very recently, my son got a request from Social Security for an updated work activity report, and he has a new job since the last time he did this. So I met with his new boss, in part so that I could explain what this form was and why it was important, and we could talk about how to fill it out. Because, you know, his boss loves him. I mean, she thinks he's great, and she didn't want to say anything that would offend him or make him feel bad, or anything like that. Whereas I need it to be accurate about, what types of supports and how much support he's given at work and how much he can do employees. And so we had to talk it through so that I could explain, no, no, no. You're by being honest, you're actually being very helpful to him. You're helping him keep the supports and services that he needs and that help him work. But we had to talk that through together. Making, and this is one where you are going to make this up, but it likely does not exist elsewhere, but it could. Making a list of the accommodations your loved one needs in order to work and the supports they use in order to work. And think about those broader pictures because it's not just about, a job coach or, the additional breaks or the reduced schedule or things like that. It's also things like he uses his waiver to pay for the transportation that takes him to and from work. When it's a third party, like a waiver or like Voc Rehab that pays for a support for a person to work, that's called a special consideration. And Social Security absolutely considers all of that when they are considering a person's, when they're considering their countable income. So documenting things like their waiver paying for their transportation or their behavior consultant through the waiver helping them work on frustration or anxiety or things like that so they can maintain their job absolutely makes a huge difference to Social Security. And so we need to make sure we're documenting those things. Their residual functional capacity forms, their VR file, their employer information, including the address, the phone number, the hourly wage or salary, how often they're paid. Those are questions Social Security will always ask. And then you're kind of scrambling trying to find out, hey, wait, do I have a pay stub somewhere that I can gather that information? Well, this way you have it all in one place already. And then again, their most recent psychological evaluation. So at this point, I want to stop again and look because we've had a few more questions come in. And so, what about IRWIs now that Social Security has, and I don't know what that acronym is for a lot of us. Yes, absolutely. So IRWI stands for Impairment Related Work Expense. So when we're talking about Social Security, there are a lot of work incentives, and an impairment related work expense is considered a work incentive, but that is a way to reduce how much income Social Security is counting, and that not only impacts your eligibility, it can also potentially impact how much your check may be if you're on SSI. SSDI is pretty much all or nothing. You either qualify or you don't, but the check amount doesn't change. And so An impairment-related work expense is money that the individual pays out of their own pocket to be able to maintain their job. So, for example, if you use Lyft to get to and from work and you're paying out of pocket for Lyft, that's an impairment-related work expense. And so that is something that Social Security will consider when it's calculating your countable income. If you are, if your employer is doing certain things for you, like providing extra accommodations or they're providing a variety of supports for you. Those are what are called employer subsidies. They take all of that into consideration. Um, if you've got, and again, if you've got a third party paying for supports like your waiver, like Voc Rehab, that's called a special consideration. They absolutely take all of that into consideration. And so you want to make sure you're documenting all of the accommodations that your loved one gets. And you may not even be thinking about it. So, you're just thinking, oh, well, they just work part-time. Well, but they work part-time because they need to because of their disability, because they're not, they need that, they may not be able to work a full 8-hour day. So therefore, that's a job accommodation because they're working part-time instead of working full-time. So think a little outside of the box when you're doing that. Um, so that's something else to consider. Um, we've never filled out SSI payroll info, and he's had a job for 5 years. What should we do? I didn't know we needed to, but he hasn't received any money for 4 years. Ooh. First of all, I'm going to tell you to call and talk with one of my family advocates in the next week or so, please, just so that we can dig into this a little bit more. But you can actually go online. You log into your My SSA account, and you can actually report your wages directly there. You have to wait until the month after all the wages. So, for example, um, you know, now that it is July 10th, you can log in and you can report all of the wages you got paid in June. But you can't, even though you may have gotten a check on July 3rd, you can't report that yet. You've got to wait until the next month to report that. So you can actually report that directly through the website. And so they'll want to know, uh, what the date range for the pay was, and then the date you actually got paid, and what the gross pay was. Those are the things they'll want to have there. Some companies actually have a program where they report your wages directly to Social Security so that you don't have to. So that may be something that's going on too. So sometimes that happens. If that happens, Social Security will send you a letter telling you that. But also when you log into your My SSA account, you can also look to see what letters they have sent you and read all of those notices that they've sent you that way too, just so that you make sure that you're not missing anything. Um, so, um, Payroll Information Exchange was the acronym I did not recognize. Thank you very much, Jan. I appreciate it. Yes, in fact, we just got a notice from Social Security for my son that the company he works for has just started interacting with the Payroll Information Exchange. So my son is no longer have to go to log in each month to report his wages. His employer is reporting it directly to Social Security on his behalf. Um, so yeah, and I think I don't know if that's something new. I know it is new to me. So I'm actually kind of excited by that. Just takes one more thing off your plate. And that's one of the big things here is we're talking about being able to put all of these documents together so that you have them when you need them. Because what that's really doing is it's taking one more thing off your plate, because I don't think any of us are in a place in our lives where we can just keep adding more and more things on. So if we can take some time and put all these things together, you know, as we have time, when we actually need them, they're all together and we can just keep moving forward. So speaking of moving forward, let's move on to the next part, which we've talked about making sure we've got all of our documentation together. Now let's talk about planning for that good life because we don't know what services and supports are going to look like moving forward. We don't really know for sure what Medicaid is going to be looking like going forward. And I don't say that to scare anybody. I say that to recognize the reality that we are in. Because right now, things are changing and things are changing on the one hand on a fairly rapid basis. And I say rapid in the sense of government time, not human time. Government time and human time are two different things. Government fast is like 3 to 6 months. Human fast is a whole lot different than that. But what I'm seeing, right now, one of the things that's happening is we're changing a lot of programs and we're changing them every few months or we're changing them every year or two. And so there's just a lot of change. And so we don't know what waiver services are going to look like, a year from now. In fact, the state has just released new amendment proposals for the waivers that are now out for public comment. We will likely be having a special Ask the ARC specifically to talk about the proposed waiver changes in in a couple of weeks. After I've read the 1,400 pages of those waiver amendments. And so we need to be able to plan recognizing what waiver services can do, but also plan for things outside of waiver services because not everything needs to use the waiver. And so we want to make sure that we're using the things that are available to us, the things we need to make sure that that our loved one is able to have whatever their vision of a good life is. And so as we talk about that, that's where our focus needs to be. What is our vision of a good life for our loved one? More importantly, what is their vision of a good life for themselves? And those two things are not always the same thing. And so that's something you've got to reconcile too. But what do you want your life to look like? What do you need? And what do you want? And recognizing those are two different things. The needs have to come first, the wants can come next. But we also need to be open to options that a lot of times we don't realize are there or that we may accidentally overlook and not necessarily think about as a way to make sure our loved ones can have that good life. And so one of the ways we're going to do that, or one of the ways I recommend doing that is by using that life course framework. So this is something that the Bureau of Disability Services uses with all of their clients and has for several years now. It was developed by the University of Missouri Kansas City's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and Missouri's Family to Family organization. And you can find all sorts of videos and all sorts of tools, and they're free. Free is always good, but you can find them at lifecoursetools.com. And the one of the reasons why I want to bring up Life Course is because it is a good way to get you to think about things. It is a good way to spark discussions. And it is a good way, basically, to get the gears in your brain churning so that you can figure out what your options are and what you really want. And they've also updated their tools or many of their tools recently. So some of these are going to look a little bit different. And so one of the first things is, what's your vision of a good life? And this is Life Course's vision tool. This is the first page of the vision tool, where they break things down into the different, what they call life domains. So daily life and employment, community living, social and spirituality, advocacy and engagement. And they ask some questions to kind of jumpstart those conversations of what do you want your daily life to look like? What do you want employment to look like? And really start having some of those discussions. And then how much of a priority is that for you? What does community living look like in your situation? Do you want to continue to live at home? Do you want to live in a group home? Do you want to live with a friend as a roommate? What are the different options out there? Do you want to live on your own? And how do we make some of those things happen? So this is a great tool to get some of those conversations started. And they've got a lot of different tools like that that will help. And then we plan that out. This is their new life trajectory, planning life trajectory tool. I have to admit, I'm a trajectory kind of a girl. But what I like about this particular one is, we've got what is your vision of a good life? What is it that you want? And sometimes what's easier to answer is, what do I not want in life? What are the past experiences you've had that are taking you to what you do want? And what are the things you still need to do to get to what you want in life? Just as importantly, what are the past experiences you have that are taking you away from what you want? And what are the things you need to be careful of or that you need to avoid to make sure you don't go where you don't want to go? This is an integrated support star, and it's the split star. And so I know it can look a little bit complicated, but it's really not. It's really it divides things into different categories. So personal strengths and assets, relationships, eligibility specific programs, community-based programs, and then technology. And it's where you can list out what are the resources you have now and what are the ones you need to develop. So let's use technology, for example. What are the resources you have now? Well, maybe your loved one has a smartphone and they know how to use their smartphone. Maybe it's that they know to always make an entry on their calendar to remind them to do things. Um, you know, what are the resources they have and the resources that they're using? And then what do we still need to develop from there? So that's where the split support star can be really helpful is helping you figure out what you've got and what you still need. Because then once you know what you have, you make sure that you're using it and you're very intentionally using it. And once you identify what you still need, you can work on developing that resource. This is their reciprocal roles tool, and this is something that, again, that I think we kind of overlook because we focus so much on the fact that we provide for our loved ones, we care for our loved ones, we're their caregiver, but also think about the things that they do for us. So, for example, my son does the laundry for everybody in the house. Let me tell you how grateful I am for that. And it all started because when my son was about to go to Erskine Green, I suddenly realized we haven't taught him how to do laundry yet. So we did like this crash course in teaching him how to do laundry. And so he was doing everybody's laundry as he was learning that because that was going to be an essential skill for him being on his own while he was at Erskine Green. And after he returned, he does the laundry for everybody in the house still. It's a little problematic because I've got to teach my younger son how to do laundry too. And he's got that Tom Sawyer streak. He gets his brother to do it for him a lot of the time. And it's like, I need you to do it this time. Um, but our loved ones, we tend to focus so much on what we provide for our loved ones, we forget the things that they provide for us or we don't think about the things that they provide for us. And a lot of times, those are some really, really important skills. Whether it's doing the laundry, whether it's doing the dishes, or whether it's recognizing, hey, mom's having a bad day, and they bring you a cup of tea, or they just say, hey, can I have a hug? Can I give you a hug? Or whatever the case may be, looking at those reciprocal roles, not only what we do for them, but what they do for us, but then also identifying doing these things now and who's going to do these things in the future. And identifying, those next steps in some of these processes. So right now, I may be, um, I may be helping my son pay his bills, but I know that now I need to work with him on it so that he can take that over in the future. Now, in our particular case, we've actually already made that transition because that's something that we worked on for quite a while. And so those are some of the things we need to identify in all of this. So we also need to figure out what do we actually need and identifying and being able to differentiate actual needs and the options to meet those needs are vital, especially identifying what options we have outside of waiver services and preferably outside of adding something else to our plate. Because if you want to make sure your loved one is able to work, well, you can't leave work yourself to be able to take them to and from work. So we need to work on things like transportation. So what's out there? Well, many communities, far more than you expect, actually have bus service for people with disabilities or older adults. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is Google older adult transportation and your county name. Okay, make sure you add Indiana to that because nearly every state has a Washington and a Monroe County, I swear. But, finding out, does your county actually have one? You might be surprised. They may have them. They may have limited hours, but knowing that that can be an option is important. Teaching your child to use Uber and Lyft, as scary as that sounds, that provides freedom and that provides them equality because they get to do things everybody else does. If they want to go to Jimmy John's to grab lunch, they can, and they've got the money, they can go to Jimmy John's and grab lunch. And think about it, we all get to do that. Why shouldn't our loved ones with disabilities have that same opportunity? But then sometimes it's also just carpooling, whether it's with a friend who's going to the same program, whether it's someone we know from Special Olympics, whether that's a coworker who passes your house on their way to work and they can pick up your loved one. Figure out what transportation options, especially outside of waiver services, may be available. One of the other things that are absolute needs are medications. So instead of always having to be the one to go pick up the medication, man, get auto refill in place. Get home delivery in place. You don't always have to go pick it up from the pharmacy. Nowadays, medications can be delivered straight to your house. And for most people, that is actually the cheaper option for them. And this is something everybody uses. So it's not that big of a deal. It's not a special thing, but it's something that we can overlook. And that can mean the difference. Having that auto refill, having that home delivery can be the difference between success and failure. And in fact, some of those home delivery services can actually portion out medications so that your loved one just, takes off the one section and takes the medication exclusively for that time and day. And so that way, you don't even have to worry about, dispensing that medication because it's easier that way. Financial management is one of those needs. And so, that can be something as simple as auto bill pay. Now let's think about what it is that we actually want. And wants are important, um, but we also need to consider that. And so some people want to be able to live independently. So what does that actually look like? Does that mean that they're living with a roommate? Does that mean that they're living in their own apartment? Does that mean they're living in their own apartment above the garage on mom and dad's property? Or maybe they're living in a tiny house on sister's property or whatever the case may be. But if we've got somebody who wants to be able to live independently, well, we start by thinking about, okay, what are the skills you need to be able to do that? And we start mapping out and making a plan, in part so that we have a concrete plan, and in part so we have a visual checklist, and literally a checklist, so that the person knows what are the things they need to be able to do before they move out on their own, and how are they working toward achieving those or to learning those skills. And sometimes that can really help. And the other thing is that doesn't mean we do this in 6 months. And it doesn't mean we do this in 1 year. Because our kids were in school and they had IEPs, we're so used to having to, do goals every year, and having to accomplish something in 1 year's time. Well, that applies to school. That doesn't apply to life. If it takes you 5 years to learn how to do something, big deal. Take the time and learn it and learn it and learn it right. Making sure that our loved ones have social opportunities and have connection because that is vital to people. Making sure that they feel like they have people in their lives. And so that can be, making friends through Special Olympics, through Self Advocates of Indiana. Maybe it's that they volunteer somewhere in the community and they're making connections and they're making friends and they feel valued and they feel valuable to others, and they value others in return. Those social connections, those social opportunities are essential for all people, but especially for people with disabilities who are so often isolated. If what they need is what they want is to learn some independent living skills, maybe they want to learn to cook. Maybe they want to learn how to sew or to crochet, or maybe they want to learn how to be a mechanic or learn woodworking. Whatever the case may be, find what things are out there to help them do that. Maybe your local library has computer classes. That's something that's pretty common. Maybe your local library actually has cooking classes that they do once a month or once every couple of weeks. A lot of hospitals will have healthy cooking classes that they teach at the hospital, where they're teaching people, how to cook. They're teaching them about nutrition. They're teaching them about health. They're making sure that people are living healthier lives. A lot of times, those are done as part of programs to help people who have had a heart attack or have had a stroke recover. But they're not exclusively for individuals who have had a heart attack or a stroke. They're open to everybody, and they are thrilled when people come to their classes. And oftentimes those classes are either free or have a very, very low cost. But that's a way that people can connect with their community. Has nothing to do with their waiver, but they can still learn those independent living skills. But then there's also finding meaning and volunteering. And so maybe that's volunteering once a month at your local food pantry, where they are putting donations on the shelves, or maybe they are, when a family comes in and needs food, they're the ones in the back who are pulling the food off the shelves to box up for the families. Um, but things like that, um, not only provide meaning because the individuals can feel really proud because they are helping others. They are giving back to others. They are making lives better for others. And so there is a lot of pride and a lot of meaning in that, but they're working with other people, they're volunteering. And so they are expanding their network of support, which brings us to building that network of support because that is vital for people to be able to live their lives. It's vital to take things off of our plates as the loved ones and as the caregivers, but it is also especially important in planning for when we are gone. you know, one of these days I am not going to be here, and making sure my son has a big network of support that he can talk to, that he can work with. No, there's not going to be one person who does it all for them, but if they've got a friend at Special Olympics and they can carpool to practice together, that makes their lives easier. If they've got a coworker who can, who can take them to and from work, that makes our life easier, and it increases our loved ones' network of support. Looking at, your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your place of worship, um, taking those community classes, whether that's, and that might be, a sewing class at your local Michael's, or something along those lines, or your local community center, or your local senior center. Oftentimes they are open to everyone. Making sure that you're taking advantage of all of those things, volunteering, but also pairing up. This is where, you meet those potential roommates. This is where you meet those friends who are going to be in your lives, and make your life better. And then finally, what technology can help with daily tasks? I know so often, families are afraid for their loved one to stay home alone, you know, and it is unnerving at first, you know, but nowadays we've got a whole lot of technology that can actually help with all of that. And that includes helping them live on their own. So something like a video doorbell. Something like a virtual or a home assistant, so a Google Home, an Amazon Echo, or whatever the case may be. And there are a lot of different options for those things now. YouTube videos, which are, on the one hand, are the bane of my existence because my kids are constantly watching YouTube videos and kind of drives me crazy. On the other hand, there is a YouTube video for everything. I swear, not only can you learn different skills, not only can you learn the tricks to the trade, like um, I got a new, when I got a new car, I couldn't get the cover off of the back windshield wiper. And so I pulled up a YouTube video for my car to figure out, and some dad out there walked me through exactly how to take that cover off so I could switch the windshield wiper on that back window. Um, Believe it or not, there are YouTube videos to help you solve math problems. So if your kid is in math and they're taking algebra and you're like, I do not remember how to do that, there is likely a YouTube video that will walk you through all the steps. There are also apps that will help with all sorts of things. Everything from doing those math problems to taking a picture, converting it to a PDF, and reading it out loud to your loved one who has difficulty reading. So there's a lot of technology out there. And as we've been talking about all of this, this is the starting point. By no means was this a be all end all. So this is where we begin. Have conversations. Think about what you want. Um, Make changes as necessary, because what you want now may be very different from what you want 2 years from now. Um, those needs may change. The what you want in life may change, and so it's something you need to be flexible with, and keep all of that in mind. But always focus on what the individual wants in life. Let that always be your guiding light. Your end goal is to make sure your loved one has the life that they want to live. And so you always need to look through that lens. And so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We've gotten a few more questions that have come in. And so um, let's see. Let's see. Individuals on the waiver, CIH and family support, they most have SSI to, or basically, do they have to have SSI to qualify for the waiver? If so, does that mean they have to get a check each month, or will they still qualify for SSI without having to receive a check each month? That's a little bit of an involved question, believe it or not. Okay, the reality is people will ask me questions, what they think are simple questions, and I always tell them, yeah, it's a little more nuanced than that. Part of it is I probably just get in the weeds too much. So now, in order for an adult to have the type of Medicaid that is compatible with the waiver, that adult must be determined disabled by Social Security. Wow, that was a lot of words. And I had to choose my wording carefully there, because so often people will say, oh, you have to be on SSI. That's not entirely accurate. It's just that most people start off on SSI, but SSDI also counts for this, because what's important is that Social Security says you are disabled. And so and that really comes into play once the individual turns 18. Prior to age 18, they do not have to have that Social Security disability, because unlike Medicaid, when you have a waiver, Social Security absolutely looks at family income and family assets. And oftentimes, individuals will not actually qualify, or children will not qualify for SSI because of family income and assets. So it's really after 18 that comes into play. The second question you asked was, do they have to actually be receiving a monthly check? That's where it gets a little bit in the weeds too. Technically, the answer is no. It's what really matters is, does Social Security say they are disabled? Because sometimes you can have an individual who may be eligible for SSI, but they are working enough that they don't get a monthly check, but they are still deemed eligible. Okay, it's possible. It's a whole lot more complicated than I just made it sound, but that is a possibility. Okay, so really, it's especially for that, it's about after they turn 18. Let's see. Could we have a PDF of this presentation for our local ARC? I didn't say that. By the way, make sure as you're building your networks of support that you are going to your local ARC chapter. They do all sorts of things, and it's a really important way. And it's also a great place where you can ask questions, where you can talk to somebody and you don't have to stop and explain things like what a sensory disorder is or what Medicaid regulations are, because they already know all that stuff. And if your child has a meltdown, they're not thinking twice about it because that's just a day that ends in Y for them. So make sure that you are engaging with your local ARC because it's a great place where you can meet new people, where you can make sure that you're involved in your community and you have real peers who understand the things you're going through. But you were asking if you could have a PDF of this. Sure, I can send that to you. And anybody who would like a copy of this presentation, you are welcome to email me at Karly, it's Karly, at ARCIND, short for Arc of Indiana.org. And I will gladly send you a copy of this. Let's see. Let's see. We also have gone to the food pantry and cooking classes and got to know the regulars, and it's multi-generational too. And absolutely, that's a great thing. That's a great way to meet new people and to learn new things, and you can make some great connections there. And so, if you've got a loved one who is maybe volunteering at the food pantry, and so is somebody else, and maybe they connect over, their love of history or maybe they connect over their love of music. Those are great ways to make those connections, and it really does make a huge difference. Let's see. Uh, okay. Uh, let's see. Did you cover flagship and I missed it? Um, I'm not sure what flagship is, so please tell me because that's just it. I mean, this is Ask the Arc, and I know that this is a little bit awkward because it's more of a webinar, but that's just it. We teach each other. It's not just me telling you what's going on, it's us sharing ideas and it's us sharing our experiences that help us know what to do next. So I would love to learn a little bit more about what you mean by flagship, because that's a new one to me. So if you could put that in the Q&A, I would really appreciate it. My daughter's 11 years old, and I'm an elderly single parent with a short life expectancy. Are there some services for her age group? There are, and more importantly, I want to focus on growing with her and making sure that we are especially expanding her network of support right now and making sure that we're expanding your network of support. So what I'm going to ask is I would love for you to call in and talk with one of our family advocates about all of this. Everyone who works for the Advocacy Network at the ARC, and especially every one of our family advocates, every single one of us is either a parent, a self-advocate, or a sibling. So we all live this life too. And so I really want you to be able to call in and talk with us so that we can talk about your specific information, your specific situation. And this is true for everybody. I'm talking to this particular mom of the 11-year-old, but that's true of all of us. Let's talk about your specific situation so we can kind of get into the details a little bit more and we can dig in a little bit more and kind of brainstorm some ideas together. So please give us a call at 317-977-2375. And we are open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. You are welcome to call us at any time, and we'd love to be able to talk with you. Um, let's see. And so I don't know that we're going to get, I don't know that we're going to get more information on flagship right now. Um, that's okay. Now I'm very, very curious. It might be a Monday Minute in the coming future. Don't quite know yet. Let's see. I'm going back through to see if I have missed anybody. Um, let's see. Okay. Um, Oh, somebody said that they just got a letter delaying SSI until we find a rep payee. It's so odd since I've been his legal guardian for a decade now. Should I be concerned? Is something changing? So rep payees get a little interesting because even when somebody is the legal guardian, Social Security wants a rep payee who lives close to them. So like if you have a loved one, even if you're the legal guardian, if they live in another state, or if they're in a group home or in a waiver home, and they live more, a couple hours away from you, Social Security is not going to have you be the rep payee because of the distance. What the actual distance is, I can't tell you. I don't know if that's a concrete thing or a subjective, depends on the worker you have. But sometimes even when you are somebody's legal guardian, if you don't live close enough in proximity to them, they will want a local rep payee. And really that's so that if they need something right away, there's somebody there on the ground who can help them out with that and who can get them the goods or the money that they need for whatever that is. Oftentimes, and the frustrating thing is Social Security says that they will help you find a rep payee. I haven't had that experience yet. I hope that happens at some point. But a lot of times, if you've got a waiver provider, they're willing to become the rep payee in many situations. So if you've got a service provider of any kind, you can always talk with them about that. If you do that, one of the things I would also recommend is that you make sure that you are getting regular financial statements so that you can kind of review that and make sure that that is working, and that their money is being managed appropriately. Sometimes a township trustee is willing to become someone's rep payee. So if Social Security is saying, hey, you need to find a closer rep payee, you may need to, they're supposed to help you with that. You may need to kind of insist that they help you with that, but also that's where you're going to look at your waiver providers, talk to your township trustee. And if they don't have it, if your waiver providers don't do that, if your township trustee doesn't do that, see if they have anybody who does. I would rather find an organization or an agency who is not going to charge the individual a monthly fee to be their rep payee. Because if somebody's on SSI, they don't have 35 bucks a month to waste on a rep payee. Sorry, that was a little inappropriate. If somebody is only on SSI, I don't want their money going to pay a professional rep payee. I'd rather them find somebody who will do that service for free. That's just my personal opinion on that. So let's start there. To try to dig into that a little bit deeper, I'd need to know like where the individual lives to figure out what options may be available in their local community. But if Social Security is saying you have to find a different rep payee, even if you're the guardian, that is oftentimes the reason why is they want somebody who is physically closer. Um, so and And I think that is it. Let me go back down to the bottom to see if something else has come in, just to be sure. Um, Oh, the flagship. That was about EGTI. Now I know what we're talking about. You know what? We did not talk about that in this one. We talked about that in our last Ask the Arc, which you can find on our YouTube channel. So go to youtube.com, search for the Arc of Indiana. You will find our session on EGTI, and also call EGTI, talk with Megan Stevenson or talk with Daniel Gurley, and talk with them about what options there are. Um, so, and I will be totally honest with you, I am completely biased about EGTI because I am a very proud I'm a very proud mom of an EGTI alum. All right. Um, let's see. Is there a way to get financial assistance while you wait on waivers? Is there anything to give a parent a break? Believe me, I feel you there. There can be. So for example, if you have a child who is under the age of 21, There is a program called Children's Special Healthcare Services that can actually help cover healthcare costs associated with your child's disability. Potentially, I mean, there are some regulations and eligibility requirements for that. There are certain grants that are out there to help sometimes pay for medical costs, but also sometimes to help pay for equipment, whether that's a communication tool, whether that's an adaptive tricycle, whether those are sensory tools or sensory toys. There may be some grants to help out with that. And so that's a resource that we can give you, that one of our family advocates can send you as well. Um, oh, somebody was chiming in, when the agency is acting as the rep payee, they can also handle all the reporting requirements for Social Security too. Um, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope this was helpful. And again, this was a place to start. This was a way to get you thinking about some of the things to do, and to give you some concrete things to do to help you get through this rather chaotic time right now, so that you're ready when you need it. But also to start sparking some conversations and making sure that you are as ready as possible, and that you are focused on making sure that your loved one is able to have the life that they want to live and the life that you want them to be able to have. You are welcome to call and talk with our family advocates at any time, 317-977-2375. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Have a good night. Bye-bye.